Get set, because it's
time to go with the It's 420 Somewhere podcast. With your host with the most, the man voted most likely to smoke out with a Yeti, Mr. Brian Brown. Mr. Brian Brown. Now sit back and relax, because it's time to go live across the world. Because it's 420 Somewhere.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to everyone to the 420 ball. That's right, guys. Welcome to It's 420 Somewhere podcast. I am your host, Brian Brown, and what this is, what you've stumbled into, is the craziest, the wackiest, the best 420 countdown show ever, guys. We come live from the studio. We come live from the studio. We come live from out on the road, from abandoned buildings. You never know where we're going to come live from, guys, to celebrate 420. I'm wearing my sunglasses. Like I got some indentations. This is where my horns go. Is that what that is? Oh, man. So welcome to this 420 Somewhere podcast, guys. We get crazy as we count down, and we get wild in the meantime. We do everything Movie Monday. We covered Batman 66, guys. Awesome movie. The old Adam West, we covered that. We did some giveaways. We did an unboxing of the McFarlane Toys Adam West. The Batman series. Very, very cool. And today, guys, is Paranormal Tuesday, and I'm excited about this one. We got military man David Edward in the house, guys. This is a specialist, the military specialist who knows where Atlantis is. He has a very convincing argument about Atlantis, where it all is. Author, great guy. A lot of knowledge behind it. So make sure you're sticking around for the interview right after we count down to 420, guys. Yeah, it's really cool. In-depth, great interview. You guys are gonna love it. And check out his books. Make sure you click on the link down below. He has a great stuff. Hopefully we can get him back on the show and talk all sorts of conspiracies and that kind of stuff. What's happening out in the world, guys, as we count down to 420? This is UFO whistleblower stuff. What do you guys think about this? Congress and all these hearings and different stuff, man. Government's been hiding some shit. I'm just saying, man, we've always said it. I think we definitely have some spaceships, some UFO technology, something like that. I think we have it. We've reversed engineered it. I almost guarantee you. I'm really fascinated with the Bob Lazar stuff and his story. And now all this is coming up. What happens to Bob Lazar, man? Those guys ruined his life. Like, they made it to where he didn't even seem like he existed anymore. Just insane. Discredited everything. He couldn't get a job. He just because he was kind of a whistleblower, the OG UFO whistleblower, guys. So if this all ends up being true and Congress acknowledges that we might have some crafts and some species, who knows what we got down in the cellar. How does that change everything, guys? Does that change how we think as a society? Does that change? Have we had contact with them? Will they even go as far as to let us know if we've had contact? Or they'd be like, no, we just found these. Oh, fucking government fucking assholes. They're all the same, guys. We just found it on the desert. And we made billions of dollars from it. Oh, man. You can't trust anybody. This freaking conspiracy bullshit. It's just, everyone's, it's just best to realize right from the beginning, everyone's out for themselves, man. Just go, don't ever think that a guy's going to be like, hey, you know what, team. In the end, it's me. And it's, not everybody, but man, it's just, the people that we elect. And we don't talk politics, so I'm not going to get into that whole mess, but, oh man. You know what I do want to do here pretty soon, guys, is I would love to do a smoke out, a group meetup very, very soon. Probably when it cools down just a little, because man, it's a hot summer. I would love to do maybe at the studio, we've got to do a drive-in movie night. Chantel, I am talking to you. I remember. I didn't forget. And a summer movie night and, UFO watching. Out in Golden Valley, maybe. Out in the Kingman, out in the outskirts. Smoke out and see if we can see some UFOs, something like that. That would be really, really cool. Because a lot of activities, man. I would love to make a run near Area 51. Smoke out and, don't go in Area 51 by any means, but smoke out and see what we see out there. Maybe by Skinwalker Ranch. That'd be kind of cool. Be kind of crazy. All within driving distance, might be a little bit. Hey, Charlie, speaking of driving distance, what's up, man? How's it going, buddy? He's got that concert coming up pretty soon. What is it? Ozzy, Metallica, a whole bunch. Power Trip, is that what it is? Man, I wish I could go. That sounds like a freaking hell of a freaking show, man. Hopefully you got the Astro van running good again. All right, guys, we got a couple minutes before 4:20. We're just shooting the shit. We're just having a little smoke out session, guys. How many of you guys believe in UFOs? That you believe that there's something else out there? Oh, man, my head. I know my forehead's so big, you think that something else out there. So what do you guys think? Do you believe in UFOs? Do you believe that we're only the ones out here? Or do you believe there's other beings? Do you believe they're advanced? Do you believe, how far advanced? Let me know, guys. Blow up those comments. Love to hear what you guys think. What do you guys think about Atlantis? Since we'll be covering that today, guys. I mean, I definitely think there was a civilization. Wait till you hear this interview. It's going to change your mind, guys. And the moon landing is one that I'm really intrigued with lately. I don't know, man. There's meat on that bone, guys. There's definitely meat on that bone for Atlantis. No, I mean not for Atlantis. Well, Atlantis, yeah, but for the moon landing, it just it just seems too convenient. I know me and Back to Retro, we have our disputes about it, but yeah. All right, guys, let's talk some giveaways real quick before we talk 420. Let's talk some giveaways, guys. We got some amazing giveaways, guys. Make sure you're hashtagging Megan Fox. We got $150, guys. $150 piece. A Megan Fox 11x17. Oh, signed, sealed, and delivered by Megan Fox herself. I don't have the thing where I put it up right now, guys. Or maybe I can put it in editing. If you're seeing it, I did it in editing. If not, just get in and win it, guys. Megan Fox, how awesome is that, guys? Get in on winning. What else we got? We got a lot of stuff up. I'm trying to Jason. Hashtag Jason, guys. We got the Kane Halder pennant signed by Jason himself, guys. Elvira, that's one. You can hashtag Elvira, but it's a beginning one, guys. We haven't announced it officially yet. But I did get to see her. Very awesome. What else we got, guys? Hashtag Halloween. We got Douglas Tate on the big Halloween thing, and I'm getting more as we go, guys. I'm planning on probably going to another con here pretty soon. So, man, make sure you're getting in on that, guys. So, Halloween. Hashtag Halloween. Hashtag Friday the 13th. Hashtag 420. Hashtag Megan Fox or just Fox. And I'll take Jason too, hashtag Jason. And there's a bunch on there, guys. All right, we got about a minute for 420, guys. And what am I getting into? Oh, man, I am getting into some of the Santana weed still, this Dog Walker OG. They are out over there, but it was $5 an eighth, and I loaded it up. It's like I got a big thing of empty jars everywhere at the house. We have to make some candles here pretty soon, guys. All right, we count it down. You know, of course, I sprinkle my wax in with that. Love me some dog walker. New deals have dropped, guys. Who likes top shelf weed? CBX, guys. Go in, get your CBX, and they're going to throw you in a gram and an edible for a penny, guys, on top of the eighth that you're just buying. They got some great deals. Humboldt Farms pre-rolls, buy two, get one. You know you want that. And then the Gold Drop, guys, Gold Drop wax, 3 for $25. That's a fire deal, man. It's really good wax. I'd get in on that for sure. All right, guys, whatever you're doing, stop, calibrate, and listen. Breathe in the positivity, exhale the negativity, guys. Whatever you're doing, stop, take a moment. Thank God we're alive. Thank God, you know what, we have a fighting chance because it is 420, bro. Guys, that was 420. How's your 420? Blow up those comments. Let me know what you were getting into. Who had that bong? Who had that rig? Who had that dab pipe? Who had that edible? Who had that flaming hot Cheeto? Who had a smoothie? Smoothie sounds fucking really good right now. Who had that shaved ice across from the Healing Center, guys? Hey, make sure you're checking out the Healing Center, 1400 Needles Highway, Needles, California. The deal's so fire that keep you cool, if that makes sense. All right, guys. And check out the dailydank.com for the wild weekly drops, guys. They're dropping. All right, I'm going to get head out. We're going to get into this interview, guys. David Edward, military specialist. Going to tell us all about Atlantis. Going to get into freaking paranormal, guys. Conspiracy theory. Atlantis. Everything you wanted to know in a nutshell, guys. I'm excited. Guys, here we go. David Edward, Paranormal Tuesday. We'll see you guys. All right. Perfect. All right. We will go in 5, 4, 3, 2, and... Hey, what's up, guys? We are back with a special one, with a great one. I'm excited. I've been excited for weeks about this one since I heard about it and we booked this next guest. We talk a lot on Paranormal Tuesday about the mysteries out there and about the past and about things that we don't understand, and a lot about, you know, a lot of history gets buried through time and through different things, and there's a lot of different stuff that we don't know. And we have, I'm going to say, an expert. I believe that dedicated a lot of his life to this. Former military veteran, been overseas, a lot of special missions. Hopefully we can talk a little bit about that. I don't know how top secret we are, but guys, please give it up. This is the most excited I've been for a guest in a long, long time, maybe ever. Guys, please give it up to David Edward. How you doing, sir?
Good, Brian. You know, with that kind of lead in, I don't see how I can possibly live up to, the expectations you just set. But I will do everything in my power to not let you down.
Yeah. So I haven't even taken the cat out of the bag yet, like so to speak. I'm sure the thumbnail kind of gave it away, but we are talking Atlantis today, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about your background, and like before we jump right into Atlantis, because that's going to be the steak. So we got to give them a little sizzle. So give me your background and how all this kind of came to be.
Sure. So I'm old. I'm an old guy.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, we all are. It just happened. I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But, so let's see. I barely graduated high school, and I mean barely. In fact, I actually I developed my negotiating skills to get out of high school, dropped out of college, and wound up joining the Army. And I joined the Army, volunteered because I felt like I felt like I was a smart guy, but I just wasn't glued together coming out of high school as a kid to be successful. Let's just put it that way. So and I was kind of a punk, you know. So I'm like, all right, look, I'm smart enough to know. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna put myself in the military. The Army was like the worst thing I could think of, and I did it. And sure enough, God bless the Army. It was 4 years. I did not re-enlist, but I joined as 11 Bravo, 11 Bang Bang, which is infantry, and I picked infantry because they were giving out $5,000 bonuses. So I went, and then you take
for
when you
all
go
the
in,
right reasons.
yeah, no, pure money. It's just absolute money. And everyone told me infantry was the worst thing you could pick, other than like garbage, sanitation engineer and cook. Those were like below infantry. But I was like, yeah, okay. But anyway, so I did that. I took the test and I scored high on they call it an ASVAB test. They measure, I guess, I don't know, they measure something, but whatever it was. So I got recruited into counterintelligence, which was pretty cool. So I wound up being a counterintelligence agent for 4 years, and I was what they call forward deployed. So I was in Panama before we invaded, and I was part of the team that arrested Noriega. Then when that was finished, I did 6 months in Honduras and Sotocano Air Base, which was the same air base just a few years before. I had no idea when I was there, but it's where they were funneling all the arms for Iran Contra.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, and it's a nothing of a base. I mean, it's barely a base. It's a runway for the planes and a bunch of wood buildings, but whatever. But we were intercepting DC-9s. Pablo Escobar was flying them out of Colombia, trying to fly them to Texas. They had to refuel. They were refueling in Honduras because it was a big flat area. Blah, blah, blah. So I did that, did some cool stuff. Then my state assignment was the 513th MI out of Fort Monmouth, who 2 weeks before I came back to him had been forward deployed over to Desert Storm, which was Desert Shield at the time, which became Desert Storm. So I don't
want to interrupt you, but before we get off of the Noriega thing, so
yeah.
I was younger when that happened, and I was extremely fascinated with it, especially. And you hopefully you can give me some validation. Is it true that we played rock and roll and heavy metal music while he was in the church or whatever, the
Papal Nancia, which some kind of church, and it is absolutely true. Matter of fact, I was on the team. I went in the night we invaded, and I hit what they called the Commandancia, and then the next day I hit Noriega's office, and then I hit his house.
Wow.
And my good buddy guy actually went to high
school.
You were
in the mix, like you were.
Oh, very much, very much so. Yeah. The guy I went to high school with was, I forget his MOS, but they called PSYOPs, psychological operations. Yeah. And he was down at Fort Bragg. I think he was part of the 82nd Airborne or some division in there. And he was a leg, which means he wasn't jump certified, even though the 82nd is a jump unit. So he was a leg. So he put up with that, but he was PSYOP, and they dropped him in. And yeah, sure enough, man. I mean, speakers like you wouldn't believe, like 3 times your height, like 6 of them on the back of Humvees, and 24/7 just played the most obnoxious rock music you could ever imagine. You could hear it everywhere. I was at night, I would go back, and I was like 8 miles away, and I could hear it. I mean, that's how loud it was. So
wow. So it was I heard the one of the favorites was Panama by Van Halen. Was one.
There's a lot of Van Halen, a lot of AC/DC. Just and and then he eventually couldn't take it anymore, and got the nuns to negotiate for him. Coward. And then we arrested him and put him on a plane, and that was the end of him.
That's really cool. Yeah, I always wondered how true that was. Sorry to interrupt your flow of things, but I didn't know if we would ever circle back to Noriega.
Sure. 100%, 1,000% true. Yeah, very
awesome.
True.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, so I did that, and then what was cool about all that, it being in the military before Desert Shield and Desert Storm, I earned what they call your shoulder sleeve insignia combat patch. So I'd been in combat in Panama, SSI. So I had my little combat patch on for like a year and a half before we had another conflict and everyone else got one. So for a year and a half, I was only an E4, so I was an enlisted punk. But I got to strut around with my my patch and my air assault badge, and I really felt like a big guy.
Yeah.
Then
It's like a varsity letter almost, right?
Exactly. I felt like I was a junior, not a senior because I'm enlisted, but I was junior. I got my letter. I got my little sweater. I put it on. Exactly the whole thing. So I did that, and I learned everything I needed to learn. It wasn't easy for me. It wasn't easy for the Army either. I often point out I received an honorable discharge, but I think if there was a scale, I would have the lowest score you could get to still get that honorable discharge. So
you met the minimum requirement.
I met the minimum requirement, which there's nothing wrong with the minimum requirement.
Nope.
It's a new day. But anyway, so I did that. And then when I instead of re-upping, I was like, yeah, school doesn't look so bad now. I've been out of the country for 3.5 years as an enlisted guy in 2 wars plus the war on drug. So I've been in it. Yeah. So I came back and I re-enrolled in school, and then I finished. I have a bachelor's in business now. I have 3 master's degrees, and an MBA, and I have a doctorate in engineering. So I went all the way. I've been president of a university. I've been dean for a school of business. I've taught classes ad nauseum I taught a long time for the what they call the Community College of Denver out in Colorado. I taught there. And,
so just real quick too, not to interrupt. So do you think it was the military that kind of put you on that right path? Like whether it be negative or positive, like you were like, hey, enough of this, and you went into school? Because it sounded like maybe before you went in the military, you were kind of done with school at that point, or you were just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. The military, the Army, the U.S. Army saved my life. I don't know if I'd gone in the Air Force, or some soft, something soft like that. I don't know that it would have been what I needed. And I looked at the Marines, but I wasn't cut out. I wasn't going to be a Marine. I mean, they could fix me, but it wasn't going to happen. So the Army was like the toughest thing I could think to do. And it's not that it's that tough, but it's tougher than the Air Force and the Navy. But yes, it changed my life. Now I went in wanting it to, if that makes sense. So I was willing to put up with, and they ran me around pretty good. I went in overweight. I mean, I wasn't soldiering material. I came out as soldiering material, but love it. Best thing ever. Now, my understanding is since then, and look, they had just segregated training with men and women. I mean, this is the 80s. Yeah. They had male and female soldiers forever, but they didn't train them together. They just started doing that. So I was actually one of the first battalions that had a female drill sergeant, Drill Sergeant Johnson. Matter of fact, I had 3 drill sergeants. It was Drill Sergeant Johnson, Drill Sergeant Johnson, and Drill Sergeant Kraft. The female Drill Sergeant Johnson felt that I was kind of an affront to the Army and people in general. So she took special care of me and really made sure that I had the full basic training experience. I've always appreciated that. and I mean that seriously, because like I said, I'm just being honest. I was not a top physical person. So I was always a slower on the run, all that stuff. And she whipped me into shape.
And it sounded like you were kind of looking for that too, right? You picked the hardest one that you could find, almost like you were challenging yourself at the time. So for me,
absolutely. Yeah. And I watched a lot of guys. I was in with guys. And when I hit regular duty, it was men and women and all that stuff, but it was just guys for me in basic training. I watched some of them that they didn't have the right mental attitude. It's not that they couldn't do it. I mean, they better physically than me and everything, but what the Army tells you when you join it, they say, look, you're joining us, we're not joining you. And that resonated with me a lot because I knew why I was there. But some people they can't do it. So it becomes a mental thing. It's not a physical thing. They could run circles around me on the runs, but they just can't quite take being told what to do, not having a chance to present their side, just having to take it, basically shut up and take it. They just can't do it. But I learned how to do that, which was the thing I needed. So
I would imagine, especially those first 3 weeks of boot camp, if you don't have that mindset going in there, because that's probably the hardest, right? Those first 3 weeks of them beating you down to build you back up.
Well, remember, I did well on that test. So I had my first 3 weeks were even worse than you might think. I did the first week of basic, which was awful. And then my test scores came back and they pulled me out. And then they put me through 2 weeks of fat camp. And then they shipped me off to kind of a special training. It was still basic training, but it was a different unit. So I got to do the first week of basic training 4 times, which is the worst week. That, and then the week you go into the gas chamber is a bad week too. But you're close to the end there. You can kind of see the end. So, and I was sick as a dog. So were you in the military? I didn't even ask. Were you in the military? I didn't ask.
No, I wasn't.
No, okay.
I wasn't. I had that weird, my age was that weird group where there was really nothing going on other than Desert Storm. So there was never really a need for it. And a lot of us just didn't go that route. But I have a lot of friends who served and stuff. And I've heard all the stories and different things. So.
Yeah, one of the things you do towards the end, you have to go in and you do a CX gas test. But basically you have this mask that's not going to work. It's a training mask, and they know you're doomed. And you go sit in a room, they release the gas, it starts pouring in. Then they pull the mask off, and you have to say your name and at the time your social security number, and they let you out. I couldn't say it. I was lost. But I was sick. I was so sick. And what the gas does is it attacks your sinuses. So
really?
It all drained out. And it was awesome. I mean, I'm like, this is, if you are really, really sick and congested, man, CS gas is like the answer. I mean, it's a bad 5 minutes, but you feel great for a couple days. I mean that seriously. It was a good time. So yeah.
I don't know if they could get FDA certified, but
yeah, well, I don't know. You pop it into crowds now. I mean, you can go buy the canisters at an Army Navy store or the military or the police have them, and they shoot them into crowds. So you just next
time I have some sinus issues, I'm gonna go to the surplus store and see what I can find.
Yeah, just go light something on fire and wait for the cops and then wave, and they'll CS gas you, and then you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to have to deal with the aftermath of that, though. It's all good until they spray you, and then after they take you away, and you got to go to court and all that stuff. I'd rather avoid all that.
True, but the gas is really good, so it's a trade-off.
But I'm feeling better.
So we got hugely sidetracked, but just to close out that, what I do point out with the Army stuff is the training I went through. I went to Fort Huachuca, and they trained me on what they call battlefield counterintelligence and HUMINT, which is human intelligence collection. So the human stuff is just talking to people and getting information from them. The battlefield counterintelligence is actually pretty cool, because as a counterintelligence agent, our job is to look at our troops and our forces and see what we're doing and seeing if we're telegraphing anything, because we know we're not the only ones watching us. Like, we have people watching the enemy, they have people watching themselves too. So like, for the big example is a lot of times units will go to the field for like a week for like live fire exercises and stuff. Anytime there was a deployment of over a week, the night before, the families would all go and go grocery shopping, because they couldn't, because one of the family members is going to be deployed. So if you just watch the base, and all of a sudden at 9:00 at night, you see that the grocery store is lit up, now you know that there's going to be a deployment. That's the kind of stuff I did. And that helped a lot with Atlantis, because what it has you do, it has you look at things and make connections that you might not otherwise make. Like, why is it so busy at the Quickie Mart on Tuesday? I don't know, and you chat about it, but maybe it's so busy because half the people there are going to Saudi Arabia tomorrow, and they're buying all the food so that it's easy for whoever's taking care of the kids, whoever's left behind, that kind of stuff. So I bring that training. So what I bring to Atlantis is, well, first off, I went into the Army, and I went in wanting and expecting good things to happen, knowing that it would be hard. Yeah. With Atlantis, I did the same thing. So the solution to Atlantis that I can propose, that we'll propose here in the next half hour, is it's like a grand unifying theory. Anyone else that I've ever talked to, when you talk about Atlantis, they do two things. They start to build the case for what they think, and then they start to build the case against whatever other places that other people think. Well, what I've done is I've said, well, one of these places has to be Atlantis, but the rest of them have a home. There's a reason. So if you believe in it, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It might not be the capital city, blah, blah, blah. But so it's a grand unifying theory. And because and to that, I bring the military and the counterintelligence and all that stuff, battlefield count, and I bring the academic side. Because like I said, I've been president of a university. I have a doctorate in engineering, which means I wrote a dissertation. I have 3 master's degrees, which means I wrote 3 theses, thesi. I don't even know what multiple thesis.
Thesis, yeah.
Thesis, yeah, like meese, mice, moose. Theses. I've written multiple theses. Now I've also written 45 books, so
Yeah.
I know how to write. I know how to research. I kind of know the whole deal. So what I've done is I've looked at this thing, and I've gone back to Plato, who's the source material. We can get into all of this, and then I've kind of analytically pushed all the noise away and just looked at it. And sure enough, there's a place in West Africa called the Richat Structure, which is a stupid name. It's also called the Eye of the Sahara. But it meets Plato's description of Atlantis almost perfectly, and contextually, it can be in a lost civilization without conflicting with any of the established history. A lot of times, when you drift into this space, you start to say things like, well, the mainstream academics don't think this, or don't believe this, or don't believe that, or whatever. But we can find Atlantis, and we don't have to worry about conflicting with anything they've said, which is what I've done. Now, I found Atlantis from watching YouTube and watching this guy named Jimmy Corsetti on the channel Bright Insight. He did a video, and he went viral with it in like 2018. And his videos got millions of views. And I was up one day, I'm an old guy, we talked about, I can't sleep. So I was watching, just flipping around, and I went to YouTube because I couldn't find anything. And it offered me up one of his videos, and I watched it, and I was like, yeah, this dude's, he figured it out. Now, he doesn't have the background. He was a military guy too. He was over in the Gulf, whatever was going on, like 2012, 2010, the second war after Desert Storm and all that. But he doesn't. The other thing I didn't mention is I've read all the ancient Greek material just for hobby. I had to read something, so that's why I wound up reading, like in the military and in the 90s and stuff. So I'm very familiar with this. He got a couple things wrong. He doesn't really know the material, but he found the place. So he broke the news. I mean, and it's very popular. And there's another guy, David Stig Hansen, who actually is the guy who found this place and actually sent the image to this Jimmy guy like 10 years ago. And David and I, we haven't partnered. That's not right. We're friendly. We believe some of the same things and some different things, but we're friendly to each other, which isn't always the case. And he actually is there right now. He is in Mauritania, and I help fund. He spent most of the money, but I help some money because there's some things I want from where he's going. But he's there right now. We're recording stuff. We're collecting samples, and he was there in October. He was there 8 months ago is, like January of this year. And now he's back there now. So between those two guys and me, that kind of is the whole, the three people who've formed kind of what I'm pitching. I'm the only one that believes everything I'm pitching, but they're kind of in the bandwagon, if you will.
Yeah. So for I know I asked the layman amount of Atlantis, like what everyone would like. That's why when you were saying that the two approaches people normally have, I'm like, I don't have either, because I know just like the basic amount of information to carry out. So for those that don't know, Atlantis is supposedly, or questionably, I should say, we know it's true now, a civilization that was lost to flooding or lost to. Kind of break it down for me. So like I said, I'm very layman in this. Yeah,
that's okay. Yeah. So Atlantis is the mythical lost something that all of us tend to have heard of, right? Just to kind of summarize, and we hear different things, and it depends on where we hear them from, and depending on what our makeup is, some of us find that more intriguing than other people. So for example, this guy David Stig Hansen, he finds it even more intriguing than I do, because he was willing to get on a plane and go to West Africa, go to Mauritania, it's like south of Morocco. I mean, it's a tough place, and this is the Sahara Desert.
Brutal. Yeah,
it's brutal. So beyond that, the next layer down is Atlantis is a story that comes to us from a guy named Plato, and Plato was a Greek. We would call him a Greek philosopher. I don't think he would see himself as a philosopher, but he wouldn't see himself as a historian either. He was a guy who thought about a lot of stuff and wrote a lot of stuff down. And he lived during what they call the classical period of ancient Greek and he lived kind of in the pinnacle of that, which is the most cosmopolitan city, which was Athens. So he was kind of at the top of the top of the top of what was going on. And Athens was a good place to live and not a great place to live. It was conquered several times in his lifetime. And he was a smart, well-respected guy. He was very physical. He thought in terms of philosophy, but he taught wrestling. So, I mean, he's a big guy. And when he looked around and when he watched what they call like the 30 tyrants come in, and he watched the Athenians try and figure out how to govern themselves, and he watched what happened, he felt like that there ought to be a way to know right from wrong outside of just who has the bigger rock or can swing the stick harder and kind of enforce their will on someone else. And, the classical Greek period is the first time in current Western civilization in our timeline, that we know of, where there was enough, the cities were advanced enough and life could be, because life could still be very hard, but it could also be easy enough to where someone like Plato could sit around and think and talk, and Socrates and stuff like this. So it's the beginning of looking at injustice, justice, laws, all that kind of stuff. So he wrote, and we all have an experience. All of us were touched by Plato. Every single one of us that made it through 10th grade, made it into 10th grade, because in 10th grade, we were all handed the Republic, which is this big, thick book, and we all carried it around for 3 weeks, and none of us read it. And I was right there with everyone else. And that's the Republic is kind of Plato's most famous book, or they call them dialogue. So it's Plato's most famous dialogue. The dialogue where he talks about Atlantis, there's two of them. One is called Critias, and the other is called Timaeus. And these are not as, I don't say that they're not as substantial. I wasn't say well known or something, but that's not the right word. But they're not as substantial in content as like the Republic is, but where they're different than the Republic is a lot of times Plato uses what they call allegories, and he's famous for this. So he'll say, all right, we're trying to figure out whether I should hit you in the head with this rock. What is that like? What is striking someone, and then he can come up with something that we can relate to that's like that, where we can evaluate whether he should do it or not. Those are called allegories.
Okay,
yeah. His famous allegory is the cave. And he said, you know what? Like, is justice this thing that exists that we can compare our lives to, or is it just in the moment and we have to kind of, every moment's a moment, we got to figure it out? And his argument was, no, it's a thing. It's a thing it's a form, he would call it. And it's, he would say there's the form of justice, and the perfect form of justice sits up here. And then we compare things we do to the perfect form of justice, and we can decide, is that justice or is it something else? That's kind of his thing.
So he was kind of like one of the first documented deep thinkers. It's kind of like to break things down, and almost a wise man, I guess you would be of his time. Huh?
He wouldn't be the first one of those. He would be the first one that resonates with us, who thought, because I mean there's Pythagoras, and there was Herodotus, and there's a list of Greeks that came before him that were deep thinkers, but not in the same way. The other guy, he came 100 years before Plato, his name is Herodotus. He's important to the Atlantis story also. Herodotus was the first historian. Let's say Plato was the first deep thinker. That's not exactly right, but it's close enough. Yeah. So this Herodotus guy is the first historian. So he's the first guy who tried to write stuff down in an objective way, just so you know what's going on. So so we're very much at the beginning of all of the things we today take for granted. We take for granted that we can go today and know that the Civil War happened, or know that America was founded, or know that Columbus was a real person. We just take it for granted. We can do that. But in Plato's time, coming into classic Greece, you didn't know that. You knew what, your clans knew what they knew, and other clans knew other stuff, but there wasn't this universal knowledge that we had.
The whole wide world wasn't really prevalent. Your whole wide world was your community, and outside of that, probably not so much, right?
Yeah. And so the nice thing with a book or a scroll, whatever we want to call it, is you can have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and you can take them to all those other communities, and they can read them. You don't have to be there. You have to go tell them.
Yeah.
Now, the funny anecdote, and I'm not getting to Atlantis, I'm all over the place, but Socrates, who was Plato's teacher, he hated writing.
Really?
Well, just like there are people like, look, when the first iPad came out, I thought it was stupid. I thought it was so dumb.
Yeah.
But this is a technology, and writing was just a technology to these guys. Because for Socrates, like, and you're talking like the Iliad, the Odyssey, major poems which were foundational to this Greek lifestyle. They started them as kids, and the instructor would say them, and the kids would be able to say it back, such that when their education was over, they could recite these books that are thousands and thousands of pages. So they just remembered them.
Yeah.
So they had good memory. So Socrates' complaint was that kids these days, they're writing everything down. They can't remember anything. Yeah. This is 2,500 years ago. It's the same problem. So, and I think that's also with Plato. The interesting thing is he's the first philosopher. It's still tough to read. It's still 2,500-year-old ancient Greek philosophy. But he's tackling the same problems that we're dealing with. We today, as we sit here, what is justice? What is truth? Right? How do we know what the right thing to do is? How do we know when we see someone doing wrong? How do we know, should there be a punishment for wrong? How do we structure society? All these questions, same questions. And he started dealing with them. With Atlantis, let's get into it. I don't want to leave this without a really good, kind of going over of Atlantis. So here's what Plato tells us, but mostly in Critias and Timius, he says that there's this dude who was this Critias guy's, and it turns out he was Critias's great grandfather, and he was Plato's like great cousin or uncle or something. So they're in the family, and this guy's name was Solon. And Solon, and this is like 600 BCE. So this is like 200 years before Plato. This is going back for him. And Solon's a real character. We know he's a real historical figure. He is arguably the person on the planet that figured out that democracy might be a good idea.
Oh, wow.
So he didn't get them all the way there. He started it, and he started it with enough. He's where it starts. The idea starts. Now, when he was trying to develop this idea, he didn't just say, you know what, I'm going to see if I can figure out democracy. No, he didn't start with that. So, but he was a politician, so he started traveling the known world. So he traveled Greece. He went to Turkey and Persia. He went to Egypt. He went to Libya. He went kind of around the Mediterranean. And when he was in Egypt, he went to, let's see if I can remember all this. He went to the temple of Neith, Neith, in the city of Sais. Now, at the time, Sais was the Egyptian capital. This was 600 BCE. Sais sits on the Nile Delta, 70 miles northwest of the Great Pyramid, to give you an example. So it's like halfway-ish between the Great Pyramid and the Mediterranean Sea. And in this temple, Neith is the Egyptian creator god. So usually we think of the Egyptian creator god as Ra, which is the guy, right? Well, Ra was Neith. Neith is son. So she's the mother of what they call the pantheon. So she's the creator god. She runs the cosmos. She brought floods. She's it. She's she's
the big deal. Yeah.
She's the big deal. She is the big deal. So the fact that, and Plato tells us, this is where Solon went, and this is where they had written in stone on the walls of the temple the story of Atlantis, which he had the priest help him write down. Okay, and that dispels. So when you start with Atlantis, most everyone wants to jump into the conversation to show you how smart they are and criticize you. That's kind of the fun part of it. So one of the early criticisms you'll get with someone who has that spirit in this type of conversation is they'll say, well, Plato made the whole thing up. It's like, that's not what he says. And he's pretty good about telling us when he does make stuff up, because he certainly does. But he tells us, and for this, he tells us it's true. And then he takes the time to provide us the chain of custody. He tells us this very specific temple and time and all of those things. So that's a big deal, because historically, independent of Plato, we can look, and sure enough, the temple of Neith at Sais, all of those things, 100% real. And this particular temple and this particular god emerged with the Egyptian dynasties and was there at the very beginning, if not before. So this temple location dates back to 3000 BCE. which is the very beginning of anything we know of history. I mean, it's the, what they call it, the twilight. It's we're looking back with flashlights and we can just kind of make stuff out. And this temple is already established, the religion is already established, and the story of Atlantis is already written in stone. And then, just to pile on, there is a guy named Crantor who took over the academy, so Plato, he did all those things we talked about. He also founded the first university called the Academy, and he ran it for a while. And they taught wrestling, and they taught philosophy, and they taught other stuff. When he died in 348 BCE, this guy Crantor succeeded, whatever the word. He ran the school, and he liked this. He was very much into Plato, and the story of Atlantis was not controversial, but people were even challenging them. Where did this thing come from? So he actually went to this temple in the early 300s, like the 350 BCE ish, and verified that it was there, and verified that it had been translated correctly into Plato's stories. Again,
so that's a double verification.
Verification, and this is all accepted history. I'm not inventing any of that. I'm just finding it and mentioning it. So Plato didn't make it up, and it comes from a real place. And now the next piece is Plato tells us, or the priest told Solon that this was their ancient history, and it happened 9,000 years before they were telling him about it. And they're telling him about this in 600 BC. So 9,000 plus 600 means the story takes place in 9600 BCE. Now that date, it's like that has to be the date. When you actually then start looking back, how Plato could know, it's like he can't just, to pull that date out of the air would be absolutely incredible on top of everything else, because that date, 9600 BCE, 11,600, whatever it is, 400 years ago, is the exact end of the last ice age, what they call the Younger Dryas.
Wow.
Yeah. So there were 3 Dryas events. So there were 3 ice ages within about 10,000 years. The last one, the Younger Dryas, the most recent one, ended in 9600 BCE. And it ended in a very interesting way. Within somewhere between about 6 months and maybe just 2 days. So somewhere between 2 days and 6 months. So very rapidly, the temperature of the planet increased about 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now with the ice age, so we have ice caps. It looks like, so like today, the Antarctic ice cap is very big. The Arctic ice cap is going down. That's all the pictures you see. But the one on the bottom is getting bigger. So there's the same ice, but it's not distributed the same. It looks like during this Younger Dryas, during the last actual ice age, it was the other way around. The northern cap was much bigger, and the bottom cap maybe didn't have as much ice. And there are some clues we have to that. But anyway, so he tells us 9600 BCE, and then he tells us the Atlanteans. He tells us all kinds of stuff about them, but he tells us that they had invaded Libya as far as Egypt, and they had invaded the other parts of the Mediterranean, including parts of Europe, all the way to Greece. Okay, well, what can we derive from that? Well, if they're invading someplace, that means they have to be close enough to it for there to be some socio-economical, socio-political reason to invade it, right? Yeah. So I'm sitting here in Florida. I'm not really too worried about invading Canada. It's just not. Now, Cuba, I might have a lot to say, because Cuba's 95 miles from me. But you know what I mean? Because it geographically makes sense. So, so like some people, they'll start to say, well, where do you think Atlantis is? And it's like some people say, well, Antarctica. It's like it fits perfectly. It's a great reason why it's Antarctica. It's like there might have been something going on. This is where, I'm not saying no. I'm not saying you're wrong to believe that, but it can't be Atlantis. It can't be the capital of Atlantis, because it's like 4,000 miles away. I'm not going to sail my 9600 BCE caveman boat 4,000 miles up around Cape Horn, the coast of Africa, into the Mediterranean, and then try and hit someone with a rock in Libya. What do I care?
Yeah. Or even know that they're there to begin with.
Even know that they're there, they even care that they're there to begin with on some level. And so we can start to whittle things away. So it's like Antarctica. It's like probably something going on. It's almost certainly something was going on around this time, but it wasn't Atlantis. It was something else. So some people like Bimini, the Bimini Road. That's another one. Probably something going on. it doesn't. Maybe it was a trading post with Atlantis, and because Atlantis had a capital city, it had a continent, and then it had a kingdom. And when we start
how big is proposed was Atlantis? Like how big of a
well, the capital city was a series of concentric circles of land, islands in a lake. Now, since we know where it is, what Plato tells us, let me work into it. Plato tells us that the Atlanteans had dug a canal 50 stadia from the outer ring to an inner harbor on the inner ring. And he tells us the width of, they cut into these rings of land, and he tells us and the canal was 100 feet deep and 300 feet wide. Okay, so just from that, what do we know? We know there was at least 100 foot of silt or soil that they could dig through before they hit bedrock, and we know the radius of the circle, right? Because the canal from the outside to the inside, that's the radius. Well, it's 50 stadia. Okay, well, how does that help us? What's a stadia? Stadia, turns out, is 607 feet. The Alexandrian measure, which is the measure that we're talking about during the translation, is 607 feet. So if you multiply 607 feet times 50, and then divide it by a mile, which is 5,280 feet, it's either 5280 or 5820. I always get confused. I think it's 5280. But anyway, when you do it, it comes out to just under 6 miles. So the radius was just under 6 miles of this place, which means it's about 12 miles across, 11 miles across. But they're thin strips of land. So when you go to this Richat structure, anyone listening, or when you're done, Brian, just Google Richat, Richat. It's a stupid name, but you'll see it. You'll see this place, and it looks like Atlantis. There's a center massive land. It's in the middle of the desert at this point, but it would have been in the water. We'll talk about why that 9600 date puts it in.
I'll put links to what you're talking about in the description. That way they can just click on it and check it out. Yeah.
But when you do that, you'll see it looks exactly like this, like the 3 rings, like he explains, and the radius of this thing is just under 6 miles.
So pretty pinpoint. Yeah.
Pretty pinpoint. Now, some other things. He tells us that there are mountains to the north and Atlantis was open to the south. Okay, well, sure enough, the Richat structure, there's mountains to the north and it's open to the south. And he goes on, there's like 20 data points, and you can hit them all. The interesting thing, and I usually read this, I'm going to see if I can find this real quick. Here's the thing you've never heard. No one's ever heard about Atlantis, even though it's in the dialogues. But every person, all the TV shows we watch, and I've watched all of them, all the books, they always ignore this. And let me read it to you, and I'll tell you what it means. So, and this is from Critias. So this is something that Plato wrote 2,500 years ago. And he's talking about, he's describing the area around the city of Atlantis. He said, the country immediately about and surrounding the city was a level plain, itself surrounded by mountains, which descended towards the sea. It was smooth and even and of an oblong shape, extending in the one direction, 3,000 stadia. Okay, well, let's unpack that. 3,000 stadia, do that math. I said 607 feet divided by 5,280 comes out to 345 miles. So he said it's on a level plain, which has mountains and the plain descends towards the sea, smooth and even descent towards the sea of 3,000 stadia. That means the city was 3,000 stadia or 345 miles inland. Okay, we never hear that, right? Yeah. I mean, look at Santorini. Look at these places. Anytime anyone sees a circle in nature, they scream Atlantis. But they aren't land masses that can support a river of 345 miles. However, you look at the Richat structure, and sure enough, you see 2 things right away. Anyone can go to Google Earth or just Google Maps, and you can measure how far is the Richat structure from the Atlantic Ocean in a straight line. How far do you think it is?
A long ways. Yeah, I'm not that good at math. So
345 miles.
Yeah,
it's 3,000 stadia. It's the number that Plato gave us. So
I was trying to break down the stadia. I was wait a minute, how many?
But also, when you look at this from a satellite, you can see the river. You can see the water flow. And then I mentioned that 9600 date being magical. At that date, at the end of the last ice age, we're in the Western Sahara. We're in Mauritania. Today, it wasn't Mauritania at the time, but it's what they call the Green Sahara. So in 9600 BCE, like I mentioned, I live in Florida, and I'm pretty close north-south to the right longitude of where this place is. I'm a little north, but it would have been like Panama, like we talked about. I mean, it would have rained twice, 2 or 3 times a day. There were rivers everywhere. The biggest freshwater lake on the planet, Lake Chad, was in the middle of Africa, which would have been one of the borders to this thing. So it's magical that date works. That it works the distance inland, and which can only be supported. And then the other thing he says, I've got one more quote, and this is him trying to explain what the world was like after the cataclysm. So after this, he's trying to say what you saw, and he's saying, so this is after the cataclysm. After a cataclysm like this, he says the earth has fallen away all around and sunk out of sight. The consequence is that in comparison of what was then, there are remaining only the bones of the wasted body, as they may be called, as in the case of small islands, all the richer and softer parts of the soil having fallen away, and the mere skeleton of the land being left. And I pulled that quote out, and anyone can go find it. Again, these dialogues are free on the internet. But to me, the bones and the skeleton of the land being left, when you look at this Richat structure, it's all bedrock. It is just the skeleton of this thing that's left. So that's another blurb where he's trying to describe to us is exactly what we see at this location. So it's just super interesting.
No, that is. And, so I got to ask you, because I don't know a lot about Plato. Again, probably just the bare minimum, what everyone knows. And Socrates, my main knowledge of him is from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, where they call him Socrates the entire time.
Which otherwise it was a fairly accurate portrayal, honestly.
It was.
I mean, they had him
film school.
They had him change
in
the
film
skirt.
school. They had to study a little bit about the philosophers and stuff too for art history. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so so Plato, was he known for like pulling a rib? Like, I mean, was he known for like telling stories, or was he known for like, these are the facts, this is what it is?
It's an excellent question. So there is no recorded sense of humor for Plato. Whatever he thought, I mean, we can get into it. I don't want to, it's a lengthy discussion to talk about what he thought he was doing. What it comes down to is there's this play called The Clouds by, I don't even remember the guy's name. He's a famous Greek playwright. And in The Clouds, he made fun of Socrates, who, for a variety of reasons that we can get into. Then later, the Athenians convict Socrates of made up crimes, and they put him to death in 399 BCE. Plato was a student of Socrates, and so what seems to have happened is he seems to have started writing down Socrates' conversations with all these people as a way of trying to clear his name after the fact.
Okay.
So, and that seems to be what he's trying to do, kind of generally. In that, he will take liberties with ideas and metaphors and all that stuff that we talked about, but he's painfully clear on what he's doing. And in like there's one dialogue, is it The Laws? Might be The Laws. There's another one where he talks about time travel. He says, there was a time when the earth or the universe started spinning backwards, and old people grew young, and people became unborn, and the dead came up out of their graves because they were now alive. I mean this is 2,400 years ago. Talk
about advanced thinking.
Yeah. But he says, we're making this, he says, we're just pretending here. I'm making this up. I've never seen this happen. Yeah. So, and just like with the cave, he says, imagine there was a cave. So he's meticulous about it. When it comes to Atlantis, he is just as meticulous to lay out the case for where the information comes from and provide what I call the chain of custody. Because in no other dialogue does he say, oh yeah, this guy went to this temple on this date and they told him this and he wrote it down. Oh, and then the last piece is he even in the dialogue, Critias tells him that he still has the scroll that Solon wrote on. So the thing that Solon transcribed all this to, they still have. And this guy Critias, who's telling the story, and Plato's recording it, he says, look, I've studied it. I've studied this thing, and this is what it says. And then later, that guy Crantor goes and verifies that, that's what it says, and it's what's on the wall. So Plato, in this case, I don't think the man's a liar, and he's very trusted, and he thinks this is true, whatever that's worth. Yeah.
And like you said, there's a whole chain of custody. One thing I wanted to point out too that I'm really impressed is you can see your military logistics. Like as you were telling about you breaking stuff down, you can see how the reference in the beginning of like your military training. Like you can see, okay, the mountains this way, okay, so many stadium length, what is that? Okay, it matches up. Like you're really breaking down the facts and like getting down to the granular. You're getting granular with it, you know.
Look, Brian, I appreciate that, because actually my approach has been to break it. You know, there's an old saying, it's a military saying, I guess, but reduce it to the ridiculous is what they say. But I said, look, because Atlantis, it's been beaten to death. You can find someone who'll say anything very authoritatively that you want to hear. But I was like, no. I can't. Let's prove it within the constructs of what we know today, and let's be literal. So what I do in the book, Atlantis Solved, is I go through these dialogues and I say, here's a dialogue, and I break them down into basically, requirements, things that have to be met, and then I go painstakingly through each one, which is fun, because what I enjoy the feedback I get on the book, not because it's all enjoyable feedback, but because I tend to get two kinds of feedback, three kinds. One is someone reads and they're like, duh, yeah, we all know this. The other is someone reads and they're like, wow, this dude really made the case. I mean, I think he found it. And then the third is this asshat. I'm surprised he can sign his name, much less write a book. His sentences suck. It all sucks. It sucks. The research is shoddy. It all sucks. But they all say, I think he did prove it. So. But what happens is people that don't want to agree with me because I did what you said, I broke it down, and they get frustrated because I'm not wrong on each of the
There's
points.
not an argument to be made because you've already addressed all the points that they could possibly argue.
And it frustrates the hell out of them. And now there's some stuff that can be interpreted differently, but that's why I made it percent. So I said, we'll track all these things. And when we got done, this Richat thing met what Plato said, 99.32%. So I tell people, look, if you really want to spend 3 days arguing with me, and I'm not perfect, I'm sure I've made, I'm sure you'll win some of the points. What are you going to do? Get that down to 95%? 94%? 90? So what? So say you get down to 79%. So what?
It's still pretty,
compared to anywhere else on the planet ever in the history of anything. Yeah, no, this is it. Yeah. It's it. And I'm convinced. I've been through this so many times. I know this data, and this was it. This was where Atlantis was. Now Atlantis, there weren't nuclear submarines, there weren't UFOs. It's not. I often say I'm kind of like the Grinch who stole Christmas, because I'm giving you your Christmas presents, and they're wrapped beautifully, and you can stare down forever. We're all excited, but you know what, bro? It's tube socks and undershirts is what you're getting. Yeah. I mean, it's just and you're getting them because that's what you need. I got to send you off to school. You're wearing shoes, and you're wearing a shirt. God damn it! And that's just the end of it. So the answer. You think it was more like the mystery and Hollywood running wild with it, like Aquaman, like all those different franchises? Do you think we kind of, hearing it from Hollywood perspective, we kind of built it up in our brains as it must have been this advanced civilization that? Well, it goes back farther than Hollywood. It goes back hundreds of years. This idea of advanced, and they were advanced. I mean, but they were advanced within context. So what Plato tells us. And I say in the book, when I talk, I assume that Plato is accurate. So like when he says something, I assume it's true enough, but he tells us that they were really good at agriculture. Matter of fact, he goes on, and I can go into the details. I know we're running out of time a little bit, but they were. And so this 9600 BC, it's magical for all the reasons we've talked about. We were hip deep in what they call the Neolithic Renaissance at this date also, which is kind of cool. I've never heard of the Neolithic Renaissance. And we were also in the pre-pottery Neolithic. So, okay, what does that mean? Well, pre-pottery means, what is pottery? Pottery is we figured out if we get dirt wet and then cook it, it holds its form. So it was kind of before we figured that out. But we find agriculture, we find the transition from hunter-gatherers to agrarian societies starting about 10,000 BC. So that's 400 years before Atlantis is destroyed. Now, Atlantis is presumably around at that time, but it's destroyed. My point there is it's destroyed 400 years into this agricultural, innovation, invention, whatever you want to call it. And 400 years. I mean, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492.
Yeah.
So I mean, 1890. That's 500 years, 520 years ago. So I mean, 400 years is a long friggin' time.
No, it really is.
Yeah, it really is. So they were good at that. And then what Plato liked, because he always trying to weave this into his thinking, is they were really good at organizing themselves. So their political structure was something that he thought was very advanced. And it certainly is an interesting political structure. What the political structure is you've got 10 rulers over 10 provinces in this kingdom of Atlantis. The first province is the capital city, ruled over by the king. And his name is Atlas, King Atlas. Also, by the way, about 150, 200 miles to the north of this Richat structure are the Atlas Mountains, which is important geographically.
Yeah.
Right? It's right there. I know, it just goes on and on and on. But then they had 9 provinces, each ruled by a prince. And they were all over the place. And what the rules were, each prince ruled their province like a king, except they couldn't invoke corporal punishment. They couldn't just kill people unless there's a law. Yeah. But if they felt like someone had to be killed, they had to bring it to the other kings, and everyone had to agree. So you couldn't just wipe people out. So that's thing one, which is hugely advanced for this time period.
Yeah, I was going to say for that time.
Yeah, I mean, these are cavemen. I mean, cavemen are around at this time. But the other.
So I just for clarification. So this is around the Ice Age.
Yeah, it's during.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because I don't know, for some reason in my mind, again, maybe Hollywood, I'm just picturing the whole civilization as caveman. But you know what? But I know better than that, because I do know that when the pyramids were being made, there were mammoths at the same time, not together, but they roamed the earth at the same time. So I gotta separate that out of my brain. Sorry.
or just embrace it, because cavemen. Cave people, we think of them as primitive.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm working on a documentary on this. We're filming it as instant, but we're filming it. Yeah. And one of the guys I got lined up is an expert in Stone Age tools. And I'm going down there. What is this? A week from this upcoming Wednesday. So we're recording this on Thursday. Wednesday was yesterday. I'm going up this next Wednesday, because Stone Age tools are not primitive. When you actually start to look and understand these things, they're incredibly advanced, they're incredibly sharp, they're incredibly difficult to make, all of those things. But let me get the other. Oh, well, we'll come back to cavemen, because
I'm going to have you back on. I think
we're going to run out of time.
So many topics.
We haven't even started. We haven't even started on Atlantis. We're just getting started. But I want to finish. The last thing that they were advanced in is they basically invented NATO. 11,000 years before the real NATO, because those provinces I talked about, the other rule they had was if any of those provinces was attacked, all of the other ones had to come to their aid.
Makes sense. Yeah,
makes sense. Now, and we know, and then what Plato does is he rattles off the names of these princes, which I think are also the names of locations. That's just like Atlas, King Atlas, Atlas Mountains, Atlantis, that kind of stuff. And so we know there's seafaring. He talks about Divers Islands. He mentions, I've got the list. I've had a linguist help me with the phonetics of this. Of the 10 places we know Atlantis, right, in Atlas, and we've identified like 5 that linguistically have a history. So, for example, the eldest of the 5th set of twins. So the second to last, guy who was going to rule something, his name was Azores, and he ruled the diving islands. Okay, that's probably the Azores that we know today. So you look, well, where does the name Azores come from? What was the Portuguese name? Okay, well, we also hear that the Atlanteans conquered, parts of Europe, and the linguistic history of the Azores is unknown. It just comes from the Portuguese language. It's what they have always called it, so it's what they kept calling it. And I've got lots of places. I've got a couple things like that. And so a lot of places people think like the Minoans. People like the Minoans, or they're like Santorini, or some people like Avalon and stuff up by Ireland. They think maybe there's land, but we find linguistics, phonetics. We find the phonetics of some of those places in the kingdom, in these provinces, which is why I say this is like a unifying theory. It's like, was the Azores the capital? No, it wasn't. If Plato's right, but it was one of the provinces. And it makes a lot more sense, actually, for this place to be the capital, because we mentioned this inland. It's on this great plain. There's rain, there's water, there's soil. They can grow anything. They found this island, which is in the middle of a big lake, so it's protected. It's the best place in the world to live. We know there were people there. We know it was occupied. So then I always close with, the question is, if someone doesn't like this as the answer, well, we know there were people there. We know the level of technology. We have Göbekli Tepe, which also dates to this 9600 date. So we have that. We have everything that Plato said. We know that the people weren't idiots. So you're telling me that, caveman Bob and his family, they walk over the hill, they see this beautiful place, protected island, lush and wonderful. You're telling me that they would just keep walking and ignore it and they wouldn't live there? And then of course they would live there. And then as soon as they live there, they're now agrarians, they're growing stuff. So now they have time. So just like Plato, we talked about already, but now they can start to think. Right? They can start to think and do stuff other than just find food, find stuff to eat. And that's an advanced society. And that's exactly what we have. And it fits perfectly.
I
last
really
thing
like how you broke that down.
Yeah.
Like you separated like the process of like, okay, caveman, you're surviving, you're hunting for daily for food. You get to a point where you're not hunting daily, you have a little backstock, and then your mind can expand a little more because you're not tied up in those day-to-day activities to survive.
Which is the current foundational theory for our civilization.
Yeah, exactly.
So in other words, if that's the theory, why don't we believe our own theory when we talk about Atlantis? The last thing we can close with ish, or round down the conversation with is, this is in Africa. It's in Western Africa, in parts of Central Africa, which we're told the current academic theory is that our versions of people, and I say our version because we're the 23rd iteration of a species of humans. There's been 22 species of humans before. But what does that even mean? But we're told we come out of Africa. Right? Yeah. Okay. So if that's where we came from, why wouldn't we see some of the earliest civilizations starting there? Yeah. If they weren't idiots and we found a great place for one, and we have a story talking, it's like it all lines up. And
it really does.
Yeah. And I didn't even get to go over that. And that's just 25% of it.
Yeah. What's some of the pushback? I mean, because it seems like you got a lot of the information. What's some of the pushback you kind of been receiving?
And there's a lot. Most of the pushback comes from when someone likes a different location. And this is where they get into this idea of, I like the Azores. Those folks tend to be the loudest. And they have a guy who kind of runs around explaining why it was probably the Azores. But it's presented as a 0 or a 1. So it's like, then they'll say, no, the answer is the Azores are compelling, and here's why. Therefore, it has to be the Azores. Therefore, it's not this Richat thing. It's not anything else. And this is why I say, well, wait. We got the whole kingdom. Admitting that the Azores was one of the provinces of Atlantis, it doesn't detract from the Azores. All it does is it lines up everything you actually know, and it removes all your speculation. Because one thing we didn't talk about, there's a continent involved in this thing too. Plato tells us that the continent was bigger than Asia Minor and Libya combined. Well, there's lots of ways to measure that. The easiest way is you can pick land masses that comes out to about 1 million square miles. Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, if you look at the west coast of Africa and then you overlay the map of all the rivers and all that, it was a separate continent, and it's about 2,000. I mean, it's about 2 million square miles. The Azores, there's little dinky islands. The theory with them is that because we're in the last ice age and that northern ice cap that I mentioned was bigger, maybe it extended way far down, which there's no evidence it ever did, like within 500 miles of these islands, and it pushed down on the crust, and then that pushed the crust of the Azores up so that it was up for a while, and then when all the ice melted, it went down. Yeah. It's like, I mean, no, what? It's like logically, can I get that? Maybe, but if you go look at this Richat, everything I've said, Brian, you can go look at. Anyone can go look at. I don't have to explain to you how the Richat has three rings of land, or has mountains. I mean, and there is no academic geologist or that thinks this Azure thing holds any water whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I mean, so we have magic. So in other words, it's not the Richat, which we can clearly see. It's this other thing, magic, because of magic. And I'm like, no, whoa. Just let's take the magic out, and we still have an amazing place here. And you can do that with Santorini. You can do that with Malta. You can do that with, well, Antarctica you can't really do it with, but Antarctica's got a bigger story. You got the Minoans on Crete. All these places you can find in the dialogue, and it makes much more sense for them to have been part of it, because we can actually see now where the city was.
Yeah, it's kind of seems to me like you're like, let's say 100 years from now, 500 years, whatever, United States is gone and they think they know where it's at, and someone says, well, no, it has to be here because Washington D.C. was the capital, and then someone says, no, it has to be over here in California, not realizing it was a whole mass of land that was separated and and ran individually.
And take that to the next step. So they find Kansas City, they find the Kansas Capitol building, which looks like this just fits the description of the Capitol. We found it. And then someone finds the Wyoming one, right? Which does look the same. It's like that, it's like, well, no. So here it is. It's like, well, wait a second. Maybe there was maybe these were states, right? Maybe these were provinces. And, DC, we can't quite find it. But this one over here makes more sense as the actual capital because, So it's that. And you just pulled a Plato because that's a perfect allegory.
Hey, that's the next shirt, guys. It's going to be on the website. I pulled a Plato.
Perfect Plato. Perfect Plato. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, we're running out of time.
Yeah, that's about it.
Much. I would love to have you back on again. I think we have a lot more to talk about, not just Atlantis. Like, I'm looking through your bio and all your books, and I mean, we could talk forever about everything, man.
Yeah, I'd be one happy to. Look, I always say, look, the Atlantis book, Atlantis Solved, and then this book, Panama Red. This one's my actual hit. So this is a hit. This is sold over 100,000 copies.
Oh, wow. And these are all available on Amazon, and where else can they find them?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you buy a book, you can find these books. Yeah.
All major book carriers.
All online retailers. I don't.
Awesome. And I'll put links to the Amazon books and everything. Hey, we got Christmas coming up, guys. You know how we like our stuff. Let's blow it up.
Buy from the Grinch.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us about Panama Red real quick.
Well, Panama Red takes place in 1988. So about a year and a half before we invade Panama. And it's a fictional character, but I did take a lot of my experiences in Panama in that area. And I kind of made up a fake character who had the same job I had. And then, of course, has many more problems than I ever had, and has many more adventures than I had. Although this book, there's 6 books in the series. And in the first book, I think I even mentioned this in the prelude, the what do they call them, set pieces, the action in the books, it was all based on something that actually happened to me, not in the same context as the story, but in the story, one of the first things that one of the main characters, when you first meet him, he gets bonked on the head by the PDF, the police down there, and they pull him in there interrogating him. So his buddy's got to go rescue him, and so there's a whole thing where they attack a Panamanian police station basically to get him out. Well, that was real. We did that. Not in the context, you
took a few liberties, I'm sure, to kind of jazz it up a little bit, but I mean, the fact that it's based on that's really cool.
So the scenes, the layout, just how it was structured, some of the things that happened, and the whole book is got that kind of stuff in it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I really I would love to finish Atlantis, and then another time if you want to come back. I love to talk Panama with you too, and the Noriega thing, and I think that could be a great stories.
No one has ever. I have talked about it anecdotally like we have, but I've never done a deep dive with someone. Well, someone who wasn't there. I've talked to buddies who were there. But look, all kinds of you can't imagine how much weird stuff was going on.
Oh, didn't she have just rooms full of shoes? Or
shoes
something
was her thing. Yeah. Well, for me, like I mentioned, the Iran Contra and the Soto Cannon Air Base, all that was going on around me. I was hip deep, and I had no idea it was going on. I saw it on TV with Ollie North and later, like a couple of years later. But I was literally in the middle of it. I had nothing to do with it, and it was. But the people I walked by had to have, and I learned all kinds of stuff like that was going on at the time. That I didn't have, being a counterintelligence agent, it's cool, but I was also just an enlisted guy. So, I worked the smaller cases and everything. But yeah, no, and I did the jungle survival training school down there in Panama.
That's
so
awesome.
So I drank the blood of the python at the end because I wanted
Did you really?
I wanted to pass. You had to. That
was the thing.
They're assholes about it. I mean, you kind of there's a mythos that they're going to do it, and then it's it's like the last hour of the last day, and they find this giant freaking steak. They lop its head off, and everyone's got to drink its blood. And if you don't graduate. You just went through 10 days of absolute hell. So you're like, I don't care. I'll put anything in my mouth at this point, and so you do.
Yeah, like all that kind of stuff fascinates me. The whole government, just like the layers that there are. I worked for a chef years ago when I was younger, and he was a Vietnam vet, and he would tell me stories as we were prepping for the day or whatever. And one that was really resonated with me, and he could never explain it. He just said it's beyond his pay grade, and he didn't understand it. He said it would be in the middle of the jungle, full-on combat. They have their base set up in the middle of the thick of it. And they said, out of the blue, a man wearing shorts, a flowered shirt, and a Yankees hat would just come out of the jungle, hand someone a briefcase, take something back, and then just go back out in the jungle as if nothing would happen, or like as if there wasn't a war going on. Just that just blew me away that like there's ops like that.
That's interesting. See, I was in much later. For me, I don't know that I ever saw any CIA operatives. I saw a lot of DEA. I was assigned to a DEA unit when in Honduras, and then I did a decent amount of work with the FBI. But I never understood why the FBI was there, because my understanding is they're supposed to be domestic and the CIA is international. Now, there's an argument. Parts of Panama were considered the U.S., so maybe the FBI could, jury a charter that way or something. But those guys and the DEA guys. They were
different breed.
They all wanted to be FBI. I mean, I get to meet during that time. I did not meet anyone in the DEA who, when I would talk to them, they'd say, "Yeah, I made the DEA." It was always I wanted to be in the CIA or the FBI, and it didn't happen. So I'm doing this, and if I do this and I pull this off right, then I'm going to go to this school, then I think I can transfer in. So I was always like, well, then stay away from me, loser. Because if you can't qualify for those monkeys, I don't want you to be my battle buddy or anything.
Don't get your stuff on me. We got to brush that off. Don't get your stank on me.
Exactly. So anyway,
all right. Awesome. Well, I appreciate it so much. I definitely would love to have you back on if you're willing to. I'll reach back out. And
let's schedule. Look, I've done a ton of these, and I've interviewed a lot of people. This was a fun conversation, Brian. You did a good job on this. So
and I'm like, and all this stuff I'm really interested in. So maybe that comes out a little more. But I love talking this kind of stuff. And cool. And that's the basis of this podcast is anyone with a fascinating story. I'd love to hear it, and embrace it and just, get your message out there. So,
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. Right. We'll schedule another one. And then when the documentary comes out, probably in the summer, probably this upcoming summer, I'll let you know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I was going to say, we'll promote that for you. No problem.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Check out Amazon. All the links are going to be for all his books. David Edward, guys. We found Atlantis. Or he did, but we just kind of piggybacked him. All right. Very, very awesome. Check out all the pictures. Check out all the links, guys. Very fascinating stuff. Give it up and blow up his books, guys. David Edward. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Let me turn this off real quick. There we go.
Now I got to go.
Thank you for joining us on the It's 420 Somewhere podcast. Broadcasting worldwide and brought to you by thedailydank.com.
Check out our merchandise and amazing content.
And follow us on all our social media. Now, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.